Sentience. Sentience is the ability to feel, perceive, or experience subjectively. Philosophers use the concept to distinguish the ability to think, reason, from the ability to feel sentience. In modern Western philosophy, sentience is the ability to experience sensations. In Eastern philosophy, sentience is a metaphysical quality of all things that requires respect and care. The concept is central to the philosophy of animal rights because sentience is necessary for the ability to suffer and thus is held to confer certain rights. Read about the philosophy and sentience, idea aesthesia, Indian religions, animal welfare, rights, and sentience, artificial intelligence, science fiction, sentience quotient. Philosophy and sentience. In the philosophy of consciousness, sentience can refer to the ability of any entity to have subjective perceptual experiences, or as some philosophers refer to them, qualia. And this is distinct from other aspects of the mind and consciousness, such as creativity, intelligence, sapience, self-awareness, and intentionally the ability to have thoughts about something. Sentience is a minimalistic way of defining consciousness, which is otherwise commonly used to collectively describe sentience plus other characteristics of the mind. Some philosophers believe that sentience will never be understood, a position known as new Mysterianism. They do not deny that most other aspects of consciousness are subject to scientific investigation, but they argue that subjective experiences will never be explained. Sentience is the only aspect of consciousness that can't be explained. I don't necessarily agree with what I'm reading, I'm just reading here. Other philosophers who also deny animals to have consciousness disagree, arguing that all aspects of consciousness will eventually be explained by science. I don't necessarily agree with that either. Ideasthesia. According to the theory of ideasthesia, a sentient system has to have the capability to categorize and to create concepts. Empirical evidence suggests that sentience about stimuli is closely related to the process of extracting the meaning of the stimuli. How we understand the stimuli determines how we will experience them. Indian religions. Eastern religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism, recognize non-humans as sentient beings. In Jainism and Hinduism, this is closely related to the concept of hamsa. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing any of these words incorrectly. Non-violence toward other beings. In Jainism, all matter is endowed with sentience. There are 5 degrees of sentience, from 1 to 5. Water, for example, is a sentient being of the first order as it is considered to possess only one sense, that of touch. Man is considered a sentient being of the fifth order. According to Buddhism, sentient beings made of pure consciousness are possible. In Mahayana Buddhism, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing these words correctly, which includes Zen and Tibetan Buddhism, the concept is related to the Bodhisattva, an enlightened being devoted to the liberation of others. The first vow of a Bodhisattva states, "Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to free them." I don't necessarily agree with anything I'm reading here. I'm just reading the definition of sentience according to this encyclopedia. Sentience in Buddhism is the state of having senses. In Buddhism, the senses are 6 in number, the 6th being the subjective experience of the mind. Sentience is simply awareness prior to the arising of skandha. Thus, an animal qualifies as a sentient being. Animal welfare, rights, and sentience. Read also about animal consciousness, animal cognition, animal welfare, animal rights, and pain in animals. In the philosophies of animal welfare and rights, sentience implies the ability to experience pleasure and pain. Additionally, it has been argued, as in the documentary Earthlings, granted these animals do not have all the desires we humans have, granted they do not comprehend everything we humans comprehend, nevertheless we and they do have some of the same desires and do comprehend some of the same things. The desires for food and water, shelter and companionship, freedom of movement, and avoidance of pain. Animal welfare advocates typically argue that sentient being is entitled at a minimum to protection from unnecessary suffering, though animal rights advocates may differ on what rights, the right to life, may be entailed by simple sentience. Sentiocentrism describes the theory that sentient individuals are the center of moral concern. The 18th century philosopher Bentham compiled Enlightenment beliefs in Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, and he included his own reasoning in comparison between slavery and sadism toward animals. The French have already discovered that the blackness of the skin is no reason why a human being should be abandoned without redress to the caprice of a tormentor, according to Louis XIV Code Noir. What else is it that should trace the insuperable line? Is it the faculty of reason, or perhaps the faculty of discourse? But a full-grown horse or dog is beyond comparison a more rational as well as a more conversable animal than an infant of a day or a week or even a month old. But suppose the case were otherwise, what would it avail? The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? In the 20th century, Princeton University professor Singer argued that Bentham's conclusion is often dismissed by an appeal to a distinction that condemns human suffering, but allows non-human suffering, typically appeals that are logical fallacies unless the distinction is factual, in which case the appeal is just one logical fallacy. Because many of the suggested distinguishing features of humanity, extreme intelligence, highly complex language, are not present in marginal cases such as young or mentally disabled humans. It appears that the only distinction is a prejudice based on species alone, which animal rights supporters call speciesism, that is differentiating humans from other animals purely on the grounds that they are human. His opponents accuse him of the same petitio principii, petitio principii. Francione also bases his abolitionist theory of animal rights, which differs significantly from Singer's non-sentience. He asserts that all sentient beings, humans or non-human, have one right, the basic right not to be treated as the property of others. Lindsay, founder of Oxford Centre for Animal Ethics in England, is known as a foremost international advocate for recognizing animals as sentient beings in biblically based faith traditions. The Interfaith Association of Animal Chaplains encourages animal ministry groups to adopt a policy of recognizing and valuing sentient beings. In 1997, the concept of animal sentience was written into the Basic Law of European Union. The legally binding protocol annexed to the Treaty of Amsterdam recognizes that animals are sentient beings and requires the EU and its member states to pay full regard to the welfare requirements of animals. The laws of several states include certain invertebrates such as cephalopods, octopuses, squids, and decapod crustaceans, lobsters, crabs, in the scope of animal protection laws, implying that these animals are also judged capable of experiencing pain and suffering. Pearson, a British philosopher of the negative utilitarian school of ethics, he is most famous for his advocacy of the idea there exists a strong ethical imperative for humans to work towards the abolition of suffering in all sentient beings. There are also some who reject the argument entirely, arguing that although suffering animals feel anguish, a suffering plant also struggles to stay alive. In fact, no living organism wants to die for another organism's sustenance. In an article written for New York Times, Yoon argues that when a plant is wounded, its body immediately kicks into protection mode. It releases a bouquet of volatile chemicals, which in some cases have been shown to induce neighboring plants to preemptively set up their own chemical defenses, and in other cases to lure in predators of the beasts that may be causing the damage to the plants. Inside the plant, repair systems are engaged and defenses are mounted, the molecular details of which scientists are still working out, but which involve signaling molecules coursing through the body to rally the cellular troops, even the enlisting of the genome itself, which begins churning out defense-related proteins. If you think about it though, why would we expect an organism to lie down and die for our dinner? Organisms have evolved to do everything in their power to avoid being extinguished. How long would any lineage be likely to last if its members effectively didn't care if you killed them? No, I don't necessarily agree or disagree. I'm just reading this article on sentience. Artificial intelligence. Also read about artificial consciousness. Although the term sentience is usually avoided by major artificial intelligence textbooks and researchers, the term is sometimes used in popular accounts of AI to describe human level or higher intelligence, or artificial general intelligence. Many popular accounts of AI confuse sentience with sapience, or simply conflate the two concepts. Such use of the term is common in science fiction. In science fiction, an alien android robot hologram or computer described as sentient is usually treated as a full human character with similar rights, qualities, and capabilities as any other character. Foremost among these properties in human level intelligence, sapience, but sentient characters also typically display desire, will, consciousness, ethics, personality, insight, humor, ambition, and many other human qualities. Sentience is being used in this context to describe an essential human property that brings all these other qualities with it. The words sapience, self-awareness, and consciousness are used in similar ways in science fiction. This supports usage that is incorrect outside science fiction. For example, a character describing his cat as not sentient in one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, whereas the term was originally used by philosopher Bentham and others to emphasize the sentience of animals, certainly including cats. Science fiction has explored several forms of consciousness beside that of the individual human mind and how such forms might perceive and function. These include group sentience, where a single mind is composed of multiple non-sentient members, sometimes capable of reintegration, where members can be gained or lost, resulting in gradually shifting mentalities. Hive sentience, which is the extreme form of insect hives with a single sentience extended over huge numbers of non-sentient bodies. Transient sentience, where a life form is sentient of that transience. Sentience quotient. The sentience quotient concept was introduced by Freitas Jr. in the 70s. It defines sentience as the relationship between the information processing rate of each individual processing unit neuron, the size weight of a single unit, and the total number of processing units expressed as mass. It was proposed as a measure for the sentience of all living beings and computers from a single neuron up to a hypothetical being at the theoretical computational limit of the entire universe. On a logarithmic scale, it runs from -70 up to +50. Read all about sentience. 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 It's available in other languages. C'est disponible en français. La sentience désignait la capacité d'éprouver des choses subjectivement, d'avoir des expériences vécues. La philosophie du XVIIIe siècle utilisait ce concept pour distinguer la capacité de penser, la raison de la capacité de ressentir, sentience. En philosophie occidentale contemporaine, la sentience désigne la conscience phénoménale, la capacité de vivre des expériences subjectives, des sensations, qu'on appelle aussi qualia en philosophie de l'esprit. Dans les philosophies orientales, comme la philosophie bouddhiste, la science bouddhisme, excusez-moi si je ne prononce pas bien ces mots, est une qualité métaphysique et implique respect et sollicitude. Le concept de sentience est central en éthique animale car un être sentient reste la douleur, le plaisir et diverses émotions. Ce qui lui arrive lui importe. Ce fait lui confère une perspective sur sa propre vie, des intérêts, à éviter la souffrance, à vivre une vie satisfaisante. Voir des droits à la vie, au respect, ses intérêts et ses droits impliquent l'existence des devoirs moraux de notre part envers les autres êtres sentients. Vous pouvez lire le sommaire en philosophie de l'esprit, en éthique, dans les religions orientales. Ouais. Sentience. Sentience. Sentience.